everyone, welcome to M4G Advocacy Media. You're watching the Journey Series podcast. My name is Mark. I'm a brown man with a light blue shirt, black glasses, black and white beard, and I'm in front of a painting and a shelf with some knickknacks.
I'm Crystal. I'm Mark's co-host, and I'm a white woman with brown eyes and brown hair. And today I have on a maroon shirt with flowers, and I'm in front of a brown background with a shelf and a clock and pictures.
And today we have a very special guest coming to us all the way from South Africa who runs a disability or a publication for people with disabilities over there, Mr. Simon Manda. Hi, Simon.
Hi, Mark. Hi, Crystal.
Hi. Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. How are you guys?
Great, great.
Here. Um, so Simon, why don't you start off at the beginning? Tell us a bit about yourself and your journey and how you started.
So back in 2010, I was in the eventing space. I was working with a friend who had a media company. We were doing a lot of management of artists, including the Grammy awarding winning Ladysmith Black Mambazo. So I was doing management for them. And I got to meet a gentleman who was a wheelchair user, and he tasked me to launch his website. So when we were launching the website, I realized there was a lot of events that they were doing to empower persons with disabilities in their space. And an idea came to me that if they were doing this in a particular city and the whole country wasn't aware of that, why not start like a mass media platform where we would, show the good practices and the things that they were doing. Hence, the birth of the newspaper called ThisAbility. The reason why we called this the newspaper ThisAbility was we wanted to see from a point of enablement, what can somebody with a disability do? What can somebody who's empowered, and if you have an impairment, what can you do after that? So we wanted to highlight positive narratives as opposed to the apathy narratives that the world go by. And also you find that in everyday life, there's two extremes that are portrayed. Superheroism and the apathy side. But in between, there's a whole range of stories and good things that happen to people every day, And we thought, let's highlight that space and get to let communities or the world know of what people with disabilities can do. So we started it as a non-profit organization, and we're focusing on print media. So we're doing 20,000 copies a month, which were sporadically distributed across the country of 55 million. So basically what you do, you target like 200 or 400 positions or destinations, and then you do drips and drops so that you can, be present across the country with so few copies. There was government assistance on the way, but then I realized that I needed to do more than just print stories. We started now getting to go to conferences, business conferences, sports conferences, any platform that had a socioeconomic impact on people with disabilities, so that we realize that if we talk mainstreaming in those platforms, people would get to understand. Here we are, years 20, at some point, just before COVID, we realized that we didn't have sustainability, because to make it in the African context, there's a lot of issues that supersedes, obviously, maybe media. We realize that bread and butter issues are more important to people. So we can't really monetize the platform. Organizations or corporates were not taking the bite. So we needed to change the focus, hence going online. Because online, you need minimal. You don't have print deadlines. You don't have a budget that you need every month. So we went online, and we started now joining other flagship programs that focus on disability, like Casual Day in South Africa. It's run by a council called National Council for and by people with disabilities, which is the largest fundraiser for disability awareness. I was instrumental in forming or starting an ambassadorship program. They traditionally would use celebrities and Miss South Africa, for instance. But then I said, you know what? For us to drive the point home, why we are doing these exercises and fundraising for disability, why not use profiles that are not celebrities, but they're very functional in the disability advocacy space. So we started that program where would empower people with disabilities to be the voice of their own initiatives. So other platforms came along that we were involved in, so that we understand and put the message across. So I still, up to now, I think that is the message that we are trying to drive home. I remember there was an empowerment summit last month where HR groups were talking about inclusion and diversity. And inclusion and diversity in the South African sense is still touching on the LGBTQI narrative. And disability is very well alienated from the discussion. So those are the platforms that I'm trying to talk to those that are listening, to say, hey, look, you have a staff complement of so much. There's maybe a provision by government that you should have at least 2.2% equity on your staff for persons with disabilities. How are you doing it? Are you struggling with that? Can we help each other? How can we best look at what your hiring practice or your talent scouting? Do you focus on that? Do you have policies in place? So those are some of the articles or the areas that we are looking at. Recently, we started also trying to have a greater representation on TV and media space. So there's a World Summit coming up in September, the first week of September. It's called the Fame Week, where you have almost all the big Hollywood
It's
studios.
called what? Called
Fame
what?
Week. Fame. F-A-M-E.
Oh,
Fame
okay.
Week. Yeah. So the Netflix is your big studios from Hollywood are there. Big African studios also represented. European media represented. It focuses on animation, music, and TV and movies. So for the first time ever, we're having a plenary session where we're going to talk on elements of disability inclusion. So where we're going to talk about audio description usage, We're going to talk about closed caption usage. We're going to talk about sign language in movies. We're going to talk about mobility and other accessible means and barriers that affect persons with disabilities. And hopefully, we think and hope that the producers and the media buyers that will be there will begin to look at things in a different light. So we're very grateful of this opportunity, and we hope that it's going to be a movement that will drive us forward from Africa, to do that. We also have friends that are in Hollywood that are helping us on the good practices that they've and the ways they've managed to engage the studios in inclusion. And of late, we also noticed that there are movies from in Hollywood that are getting a lot of recognition, like Coda, for instance, that won the Academy Award about 2 years back. And then this year, I think there's a gentleman with Down syndrome who got an Oscar award as well. So those are really encouraging developments and encouraging changes that we hope that we can also take a leaf from and start engaging and starting to talk about those narratives and say, hey, Hollywood has done it. Hollywood is training. Your Apple TV, your Netflixes, your Amazon are giving platforms and training producers or engaging writers with disabilities to be behind the stories that drive the narrative of disability. So can we do the same here in Africa? There's a lot of talent that is overlooked, and gladly there's some movies that have really taken it upon themselves to involve disability or include disability. So yeah, we're happy with that, with those developments. But as a newspaper, I'm glad that there are some things that we are at the center of, and some things that are very groundbreaking that we are witnessing in our time. Like I think you know that South Africa adopted the 12th language, South African Sign Language, as the 12th official language recently, and the president signed that into law. So together with that, I was earlier sitting with somebody who does sign language interpretation for the president, and they're saying they're very exciting things coming. They did a movie recently with an all deaf cast, and those are the developments that we didn't see 5 to 10 years back, but they are really coming to fruition, those efforts. And as a collective, these are interesting developments indeed. But we still lament the fact that we need a lot of like international cooperation, like you guys, Mark and Crystal, recognizing that there is a bit of movement in Africa, and you putting us on platforms so that we have a higher call for linkages, for networks, for funding should it arise. So many programs that one wants to do, but you lack capacity because there's no funding to do them. I'm sitting with lots and lots of proposals that I would need to, or I would want to, like at some point implement to really take change, or to put change to early child development, kids in school, primary school, youth universities like disability units, people that are over the school years, just programs and initiatives that would really, really empower people on a social economic level. But, we take a step at a time, and really appreciate that as things change, as people become aware, all these things will fall into place.
Yeah.
It certainly will. Thank you for all the great work and great initiatives you're engaged in. The world needs things like that. Um, one one thing I was thinking about, when you were talking there, I previously heard one of your countrymen, Trevor Noah, talk about inclusion, right? And I'm wondering how much this is an issue that you've seen. So he talked about, a lot of his people who are progressive and try to support people with disabilities will say they're inclusive organizations, right? They'll say, "Oh, the job we're hiring for is open to everyone, including people with disabilities," but it won't they won't advertise the job in the places where people with disabilities will see it, and therefore they will never apply for those jobs because they haven't seen the ad, right? And that's the piece missing that a lot of organizations miss. And what has been your experience on that?
It's an interesting example that you give him, because in South Africa we have the social grant. The social grant is targeted for elderly people. It's targeted to persons with disabilities. It's targeted to young mothers who are not employed, who have children, single mothers. So, as a media person, you don't get a lot of ads from government, and they put this in mainstream media um, in your big newspapers, where they take 4 pages and they talk to people that are supposed to be earning those grants. But you look at the LSM of that is these people can't even afford, to buy that newspaper. So the logic here is almost like it's mad. How can you put something out of reach of the people that you're targeting, and
Right.
they
And
don't even have.
that's why what you're doing is so important. Like, obviously, Mark and I would not be able to be as effective where you are because we don't know, we're not familiarized with the problems, the issues that are in that area, you know, of the world. So we so much appreciate people like you that have the same worldview and the same. And we talked the other day about how there's so much intersectionality. So a lot of times that people overlook and are only wanting to do the greedy thing, and like you're talking about the newspaper wanting a lot of money and you're not having an opportunity to be in there, you know it's things like that where you were just wanting to reach people on a human level, with just wanting to help people have the same uh, experiences and the same advances as everyone else. You know, that's important work and we appreciate it.
And as you're mentioning, you find that there's an affirmative action code in South Africa. It's called the BBE, the Black Economic Empowerment Code, which seeks to redress inequalities done by the apartheid regime, the apartheid era. So in the HR world, you gain points for employing people with disabilities. So obviously, a young woman less than 35
Yeah.
who's got a disability has got higher points
Mhm.
then a young man with a disability comes after that, and like so forth. So to tick boxes, which most companies do, they
Yeah.
would really advertise their jobs and they say, this is for persons with disabilities. But then the unwillingness to provide for reasonable accommodation becomes an issue.
Exactly.
Because what happens now, you hear like, oh, we're looking for persons with disabilities, but not with on wheelchairs, not of this kind of disability, but just maybe with albinism, not deaf, because the implication is when when you're hiring a deaf person, you need an interpreter.
So
So
now I'm curious. Over in Africa, do they use the same terminology as they use here? That's called tokenism here. Do
uh,
they use that word
that's
there?
we call it funding.
Okay.
Funding, because
Okay.
you find that if the BEE code, like I said, the affirmative action also applies to
Mm,
businesses,
mm,
shareholding. So it has
mm,
levels of engagement. So when it comes to business ownership, there's a lot of people that front by putting
mm.
a profile of a person with a disability, but in
Right.
real terms, they don't even have a voice. They
Right.
don't even have, they don't even half of the times know how a company runs. And they're just
Right.
there because there's the points or there's a percentage that you need to reach that shows that you've got a person with a
Yeah.
disability in your company. Yeah,
Mm,
tokenism it really exists, and we just call
yeah.
it funding. Yeah, and
Oh,
and it's not. I was in the States recently. I've realized there's so much as much as you guys are advanced, you've got also the American Disability Act. Here we're still on the white paper
yeah.
of there's no law yet.
Mm.
We don't have that. But I found that the struggles are still more or less the same. There's still things
That's where
like,
I'm talking about the intersection,
mm,
the intersection of the intersectionality and the disability community throughout the world is on a sometimes level playing field, and it's really sad.
yeah, and that's why you find the ableism part being employed into the whole equation. The only difference I really appreciated you being a first world is that there is budgets. There's still budgets. There's still
Oh,
programs that
the,
at least, level the playing field in terms of if you talk about access and people get into a group action, there might be movement in terms of change. Whereas here, it's an uphill task. South Africa is fortunate because it's got a very robust constitution, which really have these things well adopted from the Convention on the Human Rights, the United Nations one. Then they've also ratified the African Disability Protocol. There's an organization that is trying to drive the SADC. The SADC, we've got blocks in Africa. SADC is the Southern African Development Corporation. Then there's the ECOWAS, which is the eastern side. Then we have which is the western side. Then we have the eastern bloc. But the southern bloc, there's an organization that's trying to um, domesticate the African disability policy, which people haven't really bought into it. But it really has like domestic applications in the African or the Southern African context. But okay, going back to legislature, very
Mhm.
well embedded into the Constitution, very well articulated. But the
Mhm.
practicality of it being employed into the scenarios of human life and translating to the applications is still a problem. It's still a
Mhm.
very big challenge. You know, people are always talking about lack of employment opportunities. People with albinism are always talking about accommodation, a daily life struggle of not having sunscreen, you know, and as much as government provides for it, it's not as broad-based as it should be, because rural areas also are difficult to access. So
Mhm.
you find that what the newspaper then tends to do is to look at how can we now partner and raise that voice to say there is a profile ABC or an organization ABC that has done 1, 2, 3, and where can we meet each other? And now, instead of looking to government for assistance, I think a lot of corporates now have to come to the party. But you
Mhm.
know, corporates also are in it for business. Even the CSI component, the corporate social investment, is a social investment program. It means it has to have return on investment,
Right.
which yeah, you understand. So it's still a business. But
Mhm.
regardless, if there is change and there's positive impact in these communities, we appreciate that, you know. But rather play with the better devil than the government that doesn't even have programs at all, you know.
Mhm.
So it's a catch-22 situation, but also there might be cause now with the evolving technology, artificial intelligence, where now organizations have to dig deeper and think out of the box. How can we advocate in our
Mhm.
own spaces using our human resources and use the best technology available to our advantage without seeking for outside help from corporates and from government. So this is where we are as far as
Yeah.
advocacy is involved. Yeah.
Um, it it must be sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Um, about the so that's why the work you're doing with disability is so important because you know organizations like who are seeking that return on investment, the more that they begin to understand that their their preconceived ideas or the biases about not being able to get a return on investment is something wrong with their thinking, right? And as soon as we can get their thinking to change, you can get a return on investment with any number of disabled people. They just need the right things in place, a little bit of support to get to that level. But um, and I feel that's where your newspaper is helping by illustrating how these people can do amazing things if they're just given a chance to.
Right. Mhm.
Yeah, that's
And
that's more like it. But now to get to that conversation, it's difficult. Remember, um, people have their preconceived ideas on what accommodation, what disability is,
mhm.
and that is
There's got
also
to
shaped.
Yeah, there's definitely got to be some equity there. And like we mentioned before, the level playing field all across the world, you know, to make those things happen that you're speaking of.
Yes.
Sorry, go
It's
ahead.
yeah, it's it's you find that this is where you have limiting beliefs from society,
Mm,
because all they know is the disempowerment of disability. And it's
mm,
been a long history of that. Now,
mm,
anybody who just goes beyond ability is a
mm.
superhuman, you know, and
Right.
they projected. You know, we see these examples. There was Oscar Pretorius, who challenged, you know, the Blade Runner,
Mm,
and yeah, and he was put in that superstardom uh, position. Then he had a personal tragedy, and you fall from grace as quickly as people having put you on that pedestal, but not knowing that this is just a human being with an impairment. And that's just that. They were
mm,
afforded an opportunity, or they were afforded access to be competent on a world stage. But they're
mm.
still human after that. They have human emotions, human weaknesses, and human. So it becomes a big story and a big sort of interest. That's the human nature of how we are. We sensationalize things. But if we look in society right now, I've been privileged to interact with great minds and people that are just trying to make a difference in their own space. Um, this leads me to the creative platform of persons with disabilities. I know it's still in the media and entertainment space. In 2016, I linked up with somebody from the States. Um, they run an organization called Crip Hop Nation, Leroy Moore. He came to South Africa in 2016, and we went around South Africa documenting creatives with disabilities. And by creatives, I'm talking about musicians, poets. We're talking about people that can use their hands, you know, to do artwork and crafts. And we got a sizable amount of interviews and meeting people, because we went to more than 10 cities across South Africa. And when we're done, we didn't have further engagement with anybody, but the dream stays on that next year or the next 2025, we're doing that same exercise again to create an academy where we now try to empower with a network, South Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, Congo, you know, form, you know, chapters in those areas. But the interesting development after we done this exercise was one of Netflix documentaries, Rising Phoenix, actually has a musical score by Crip Hop Nation, and it won an Emmy Award. So these are positive developments, and you realize that with recognition like that, you now have an international network of possibilities. You know,
Yeah.
you know now you can be also be afforded the same platform
Mhm.
to showcase your talent and be recognized with the same standards as everybody else in the world. So those are some of the positive things that we look out to, and we hopefully that we keep on engaging and knocking on doors so that if you are recognized at an international platform, translate it to maybe bring it home, where now we hope that to extend that recognition and start being included into the mainstream arts program
Mhm.
or teaching, whatever it is that can empower and carry on the advocacy message. So yeah, that's also the hope and dream of those
Awesome.
things.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a major opportunity when you're given a platform such as big as that,
Mm.
to be able to talk about the issues and show the issues and discuss those issues, and then hopefully some people are watching that are going to help you with those issues.
That's true. That's true. That's true.
You were talking, Simon, before about, comparing North America or the US with Africa, in the sense that we're ahead with the ADA and other things. But I think that there's a lot of opportunity in where you are at as a country. Because although we have these things in place, we're really sort of, our hands are tied in a lot of ways, in that you have to go through all this red tape to get anything done. Whereas my sense, anyways, is over there, you have people that are willing to come together as a community and really impact the world, like they did in the case of Mandela. They came together and there's real change and force that would never happen over here, because everyone's sort of asleep at the wheel, kind of. It's like we're by the media and all this other stuff, we're just sort of okay with being where we are, but we don't have that fire to make any real significant change like you might have the opportunity to do over there.
But you know why I'm saying you might be steps ahead. You see, with the legislature in place like that in the Constitution, it allows you to mitigate issues by taking them to court, because it's written in black and white. Whereas here, without proper legislative measures, people are bound to sleep on the job if you're in government, because there's no obliging, statute that will hold you accountable. So we have the Constitutional Court, yeah, which deals with the matters of the Constitution, and you can take a government department or anybody for that matter on issues that are in the Constitution and provided for to the Constitutional Court. And you can get some kind of traction in terms of winning or stating an argument. But if no legislature exists, like in our case, there's only the white paper, which is still in discussion for years and years, and this hasn't been passed into a bill and adopted into the Constitution. You can't really do anything. You can't even hold it in court because it's not an adopted piece of legislature. But with the American Disability Act, if the provisions are not adhered to, you guys have all the rights to take somebody to the Constitutional Court, and you can hold a case in that, be it a class act or any organization that wish to challenge the government or any other institution that is not adhering to that legislature. So that's what I was kind of referring to.
That's true.
That's a difficult thing, because even the law system here is so messed. So even if you do put those things, try to
and I'm sure, like, over there, it's like we were talking about intersectionality. It's there's a lot interwoven with poverty and race and things like that, where although certain things are in place for on paper, they're in place, but you have to be the right type of person, in quotes, to be able to access those systems in the right ways to actually impact your life and not get shut out of those systems, you know? And
It says a lot.
it's not said like directly or overtly. It's just something that's in the air, and you just get the sense that,
It says a lot more about your character and how much you care about humanity, whether you allow those laws to happen or be in place and actually assert them instead of just turning a blind eye, letting them happen. And that is something very much all over the world. But no matter where you live, though, it doesn't matter. It all goes back to your character and what you're allowing to happen in your country.
Yeah.
But you are right, and we don't mean to seem ungrateful for the things that we do have in place. It's just some like as when it comes to a practical matter, it's more difficult than it sounds or it seems sometimes, no? But that's not to say it's not a good system. It's just it's not available to everyone who needs it necessarily.
There should not be so much more seemingly to be here than there. Should be an equal, like we said, an equal playing field, and as a human, everybody should have the same rights, and the same thing to be comfortable and survive without being in survival mode all the time, you know.
But I've got a suggestion. I've got a suggestion. We can swap places for a month.
I don't know.
You come up, but a month will be, yeah, I know, a month will be a breeze for you because you'll be like, oh, the weather is amazing, all these things. Before you start seeing anything, you need 5 months.
Yeah.
You need 5 months.
Crystal's starting to get me used to the idea of sarcasm, and I think that was sarcasm, right?
Yeah, but no, but to for you to really understand the times, you need to be on the ground, and it depends who you meet. Some people would tell you that what, within our space we're okay, if they have resources, and you see the good side of things, but on a majority stand, it's also a political setup where the issues of poverty are still being dealt with, and it's logical to say that a lot of people with disabilities are not in the employment space, the ones that are able to be employed. But the background really starts on the system of education as well. Because I use this chart that I refer to. If below 4 years, there's a high immortality rate. Between the ages of 6 to 8, you're still grappling with placement in primary school, because some kids go to school late or they are not accepted in some instances. So as you go up the ladder, the numbers dwindle. high school, for instance, is it a mainstream education type of school, or is it what you call vocational, where you do your crafts, your carpentry, motoring, instead of the academic syllabus. Then when it comes to university, tertiary, lack of accommodation, lack of financing. So it dwindles. You find that you might have a finite number of PhD holders in a country. It's a very finite number because getting there is very difficult. So that also, equates to the adoption of talent in the employment space. So you find that the number of people that are unemployed is a very high number in disability. That unfortunately equates to the social economic status of people, why you don't see them in public spaces, why you don't see them in musical concerts, festivals, movies. It's not because at times it's not an access issue, it's an affordability issue. Um,
Same with government, right? Same with government. I mean, they're not going to get to a place to make a decision about people like them, right?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, you find those are the barriers now to entry in any, especially in the socioeconomic platforms. So educational system and where people fall off. So that right at the top to the PhD level, you have very little numbers. And that correlates to absorption in employment opportunities, and then thereby impacting affordability and the social standing of people in society. And then you have invisibility of persons with disabilities in the social platforms. And you'll be like, is it because there's no access? But yeah, the biggest issue is affordability, to be in some of these spaces, affordability to pay your own way. Hence, maybe when government come up with social grants, which are not even enough. And we have also cases in those scenarios where people with disabilities, children with disabilities, are abused by families. They just are relevant to collect that check monthly, but after that they're hidden from society because of shame or because of existing cultural or traditional beliefs. So it's really a lot to take.
It
But
is
you
the
believe in
generational, yeah, the generational and cultural uh, disparities are a lot. And then you throw in a disability that's much harder task to deal with.
it's sad. It's now you believe that if you make or change one person's life, it might have a pay forward effect if they also in their turn, help somebody else. Yeah. Maybe that's what we need. Pay it forward and
Yes,
hopefully that
for
we change
sure.
Yeah.
uh,
And
one person at a time.
yeah,
One person.
right.
Yep.
That's what we're trying to do as well. And we have to do it gently and cordially, and because what really needs to change is not the people's, I mean, obviously ultimately people's behavior has to change, and their attitudes and the way they interact with people with disabilities that have to change. but that's not going to change if we don't address. It's rooted in fear and ignorance. And once we get those things out of the way, the other stuff just kind of, well, I mean, we still have to
That's
work at
what
it,
we,
but it's going to be
yeah,
easier.
we hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, and although all the different things like sexism, racism, ableism, all these things, although they manifest themselves differently for different people around the world, they're all rooted in fear and not understanding people because you're afraid they're gonna steal your jobs or steal something from you or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very true. That's very true. That's very true. So all we can do is maybe join hands and, get the message across of the things that could, empower people.
So I want to kind of pick your brain here. You used a good analogy of, join hands and, in the past, uh, people get made fun of, you know, joining hands, like singing Kumbaya and all that stuff, But on a spiritual level and a human level, that is what needs to happen
Yeah.
for people to understand the issues and to
Right.
have hope going forward for the future generations. You know, um, so what are your thoughts on that?
Repeat that again, sorry. Repeat that again, sorry.
You were bringing up, the whole we need to join hands, and something that's said here is like sing Kumbaya, join hands and sing Kumbaya. Um, and that's a lot of times in here it's made fun of, like they think that's going to solve everything. But that seems to me to be exactly what we need on a spiritual and human level to be able to do that.
I wanna look at that analog at a different angle, because you find that at a music conference, when there's a easy go by song that talks to unity, that talks to togetherness, people join hands, and they start, shifting from left to right, meaning they're in unison with what they are doing. Also, joining hands has this analog of a person that has achieved, extending a hand of assistance and pulling up the person that is at a lower level than them, for them to reach the same or maybe better than where they are. So it depends how we look at it. But at the end of the day, we're human. We have the same feelings, whether it's laughter, whether it's crying, whether it's loving, whether it's hating. It's the same. It's a universal
Yeah.
feeling. Yeah, it's a universal feeling. And when we talk of things like disability, inclusion, creating access, mainstreaming platforms, it's a universal call, you know.
Right.
Um,
As it should be.
what you call it, a side pavement that's uneven for a wheelchair user is uneven for somebody, whether they're American, whether they're Angolan, whether they're Chinese. It's the
Necessary,
same.
yeah.
It's the same. Um, and we almost reaching a convergent point of understanding that ableism, sexism, homophobia, they are the same anti, isms that people are fighting for. So the analogy of joining hands really means that, we join hands for a common cause. We join hands to sing a common song that makes us feel lighthearted, that makes us feel good. And yeah, yeah. And if there is resources that can be shared, can we gladly do that without pocketing each other's lines, but looking at the greater good of communities? Like I was telling you that I'm sitting on a lot of proposals that need the right funding. But when you look at them, it's actually putting an economic value on a lot of people with disabilities, that they will, start also making their own decisions in things that they need to buy and better their lives with. So yeah, joining hands, as much as it can be fun to somebody, who is that person that's looking at it with fun?
Yeah.
Are they some rich person that think they don't need the world? How do they get those riches? There were people involved, Yeah, it's yeah. Sorry to cut you, but
Yeah.
it
Okay.
is what it is.
Now, it's also a situation of that unconscious bias that we grew up with, where we were taught in schools and even at home sometimes, that that country is bad. That country, starts wars or does this or does that. And then obviously we grow up with that mentality of let's no, uh that's not the country I wanna, or somebody from that country I don't want to associate with. I don't want to talk to. But you know, it is so awesome doing the work that we do, because we talk to so many different people from different countries, and they want the same exact things. They have the same emotions. They have the same worries, the same, joys and everything else. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just so, mm, I wish more people would be able to experience the kind of things that oftentimes people with a disability have more of a sense of what kind of things are in place that make you struggle. What kind of things are not just disability, but also if you have inequality or if you have issues that hurt, your community, of course that's going to set you back.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. That's very true. Yeah, no, it's yeah. I hope that in the different conversations that you're holding with different people, uh, the outcomes of what we are trying to achieve will converge at some point,
Yeah, we
and we
do
just
too. Yeah.
so we take the good things that are good practices, things that are being applied elsewhere,
Mm-hmm.
because the different initiatives that we do in our individual spaces and the small changes we hope that will take place in our communities will maybe one day have a ripple effect, And it just takes one stone to have a ripple effect to cause a major, shift in things.
Yeah,
And yeah, the impact is what's important, not the stone, but the
very
impact.
much. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
So
Well,
again, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
No,
Yes.
I was just going to say again, thank you for, because I mean, it would not be possible for Mark and I to go where you are and do what you do because you have that lived experience of in that area, you know. Um, but the mission is the exact same. You know what I'm saying? So we really appreciate you being there doing what you do.
Yeah.
I hope,
That
I hope and wish and pray that one day you could visit.
yeah,
Yes, that would be awesome.
that would be amazing if we could do that.
I
Yeah,
don't
so
think it's an impossibility. I don't think it's an impossibility.
yeah.
It's actually very possible these days. Um, just I want to add one thing. I'm working with this lady who's a former TV presenter. She's also a wheelchair user, and
Mhm,
she does audit spaces in luxurious hotels and spaces
mhm,
because of the foreign market that she's targeting. So last year, we went to the largest tourism expo. It's called AccessAbilities.
mhm.
AccessAbilities is the largest inclusive tourism platform in the MENA region in Dubai. That's the Middle East. Um, it it's really eye-opening. They don't call persons with disabilities the way we call them. The politically correct term in that area is called people of determination.
Oh,
That's
I
what they
like
say.
that. Yeah.
People of determination, you know. And
Mhm.
it's a very, very big movement in the Middle East where you see all this technology that they're employing to include persons with disabilities to access spaces geographically. So it's something that you might need to just look at. I'll put
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
we might have
I'll,
to borrow that.
yeah, it's I'm putting it on the chat. It's actually
Okay.
Yeah.
in October this year. AccessAbilities Expo.
Okay.
AccessAbilities
Thank,
Expo.
thank you.
If you can go to their website, you find, yeah, we went there last year and it was very eye-opening.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah, I've copied that. Um. Well, thank you, Simon. It's probably a little bit late over there, isn't it? About 9 p.m. Around there.
Simon, you there? Keep first. Oh, there you
Oh,
go. Hmm,
What
hmm.
happened?
well, I don't know. I think you got disconnected. Welcome
Yeah.
back.
Ah,
Mhm.
I was just saying thank you for sharing all that information about what you're doing and having that discussion with us. It's probably around 9 p.m. over there, isn't it?
it
9 or
is.
10?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
it
one
is.
more thing I want to ask. Are you working on anything that you want to promote for?
I wish this conference that we are attending would be hybrid. I don't think so. But
Uh,
I'll send you, I think they will record the session and I'll send you that.
okay,
Maybe
great.
my ask would be for the work that we are trying to do here, maybe we share good practices. I'm also thinking of starting a podcast, although a friend of mine has started it in Cape Town. So if you go to our website, you'll see that I've added a page of her interviews on our website. So yeah, I would want also to look at your podcast and maybe
Yes.
try to share some of the interviews there because in these conversations we pick up the good practices, and that's what we adopt and see if they're applicable in the spaces that we operate in.
Yeah.
We always think of funding, we always think of resources, but maybe the resources we will need is just an idea that will spark off something and big into a bigger, idea, or a bigger movement from there. Yeah.
Yeah, and oftentimes our ideas of resources are what we have around us, and through our systems and through our governments, we're much more of a global, truly global, like we're one planet and there's lots of resources as long as we share them.
I agree 100%. Thank you, Mark and Crystal, for having me. I
You're
hope
so welcome. Thank you
yes, I
for
hope
joining us.
we
This
can,
was
Yeah.
really good episode. Thank you.
we can change the world one step at a time.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you don't mind, when you're ready to share also this podcast, so that maybe we can put it online as well on our site and just
Absolutely.
encourage others.
Yeah.
Thank you for the good work you're also doing.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I appreciate it.
Great.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank
you
you.
so
Thank you,
much.
Simon.
Thank
Really
you so
appreciate
much.
it.
Bye.
Good day to you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good evening.
Same to you guys. Same.